The Kansas City Chiefs have done it. They have gotten their first round wide receiver in the 2024 NFL Draft, that wide receiver being notably Xavier Worthy, the fastest man in the history of the NFL Draft. They had to shuffle around a little bit in order to get their man. Brett Veach ended up getting aggressive and jumping over who we assume was the San Francisco 49ers in order to move up to the 28th pick. Now, in order to get this done, Brett Veach moved back from 95 in the third to 133 in the fourth round, meaning that the Kansas City Chiefs will not have a third round pick this year. They have two next year. So we are yet to see whether or not the Kansas City Chiefs will get aggressive with their second round pick too. I am of the belief that they will, but the Kansas City Chiefs moved back from 221 in the seventh round all the way back to 248 in the seventh round. So the Kansas City Chiefs moved back a whole lot in order to jump up 4 spots, but it looks like they got their man. This seems to be the player that the Kansas City Chiefs have been targeting. It seems to be the Chiefs wanted all of that speed. Now, in this video, we will have a breakdown of just who Xavier Worthy is. We will talk a little bit about Xavier Worthy's strengths and weaknesses. And finally, in this video, we will have an analysis on the Xavier Worthy pick. This is just the reaction video that I have for this pick. I will be back at some point with a much longer form video over the Kansas City Chiefs drafting Xavier Worthy, and I will be back with every pick, analysis for every pick that the Kansas City Chiefs make here in the 2024 NFL Draft. So make sure you stay tuned to this channel, stay tuned to this space for those videos as well. So, just who is Xavier Worthy? Well, the wide receiver out of Texas is 21 years old. That seems to be a big deal for Brett Veach. One of the things that might be worth keeping an eye on when we talk about Brett Veach and his draft picks and potential draft picks in the future. Brett Veach likes to draft players, who have room to grow. Born 2003, so Xavier Worthy will turn 22 years old tomorrow. Happy birthday, Xavier Worthy. The wide receiver is 5'11", which, as you see there, puts him in the 23rd percentile for wide receivers, but plenty of wide receivers are under 6 feet. However, his weight of 165 pounds puts him in the first percentile for wide receivers, the first percentile, and we will get back to this later. I'm not going to harp on it too much. 8 3/4 inch hands is 21st percentile, and arm length is 31 1/8 inches, which puts him in the 33rd percentile. All of these numbers, it is worth noting, put him in the bottom 1/3 of National Football League wide receivers, with that weight again putting him in the bottom 1st percentile. But cue up the Tech 9 songs, because it is night and day after that. A 4.21 40-yard dash is famously not only the 100th percentile, it is the only 4.21 40-yard dash in the history of the NFL Combine. He set a record with that run. His 10-yard split on that run of 1.49 is 92nd percentile, which, that's just phenomenal stuff from movement skills, but those movement skills come from his explosive athleticism. A 41-inch vertical jump puts him in the 96th percentile, and a 131-inch broad jump puts him in the 96th percentile there as well. So Xavier Worthy, the human measurable, is in the bottom 3rd percentile, but Xavier Worthy, the athlete, is in the 90th percentile. And what did he do at the college level? What were his stats like at Texas, a Big 12 school, which will be, by the way, an SEC school moving forward? Well, he played in 12 games as a freshman, racking up 62 receptions for 981 yards, which equals a 15.8-yard average. He also had 12 touchdowns as a freshman. His sophomore season, he played in 13 games, 60 receptions, 760 yards, which means he had a 12.7-yard average and 9 touchdowns. And then his senior season there, he played in 14 games, had 75 receptions and 1,014 yards, which comes out to a 13.5-yard average and only 5 touchdowns. Now, part of this production drop-off, that you could say drop-off there, a 15.8-yard average and 12 touchdowns as a freshman, all the way down to a 13.5-yard average and 5 touchdowns as a junior. There was the emergence of several other players on that Texas offense. I don't think that the quarterback play necessarily helped out Xavier Worthy at all. And defenses really knew what they had to do while facing Xavier Worthy. You do not let him behind you. But also, Worthy was counted on to run a bunch of different routes as he progressed as a wide receiver. One thing notable from his college statistics that I think is going to be counterintuitive to what many people are going to think about Xavier Worthy joining the Kansas City Chiefs. His freshman season, he had just 1 rushing attempt. Then in 2022, he had just 2 rushing attempts, and in 2023, but 4 rushing attempts, giving him 56 total rushing yards as a college player. I do not believe that the running game will be part of his repertoire in Kansas City. But I'll get into this a little bit in the analysis part. I think he's going to be in motion a lot, and I think that the threat of him running the ball will constantly be on the table. So, what are Xavier Worthy's strengths and weaknesses? Well, I've got 3 of each listed on the screen right now. I will run through those real quick, but there are many more things we are going to talk about than these 3 on either side of your screen. The strengths are speed, route running, despite what I think you're going to end up hearing in a lot of the media, and his competitive nature. The weaknesses, obviously size, strength, and maybe drops. Now, the speed factor on his strength, this is elite speed, and the one thing that is necessary to really note about this is that it is game speed. There are a lot of guys who end up, Bryce Wheaton Ford last year, I believe, ran the fastest 40 at the NFL Combine, ended up not getting drafted. You do not see a whole lot of that elite speed on film. With Xavier Worthy, you really do. Add to this, appendaging to that idea of speed. He's not just going to be on the field to run straight really, really fast. His route running is incredibly active. He is very, so the one thing, he's very good at running mid-level routes. 10 yards, 15 yards, 17 yards, and breaking down and absolutely destroying a cornerback that way, which is going to serve this offense very well. You remember last year, Marquez, so I shouldn't get into this here, this will be more of an analysis factor, but Marquez Valdes-Scantling was a fast guy, but he couldn't do anything with it. Xavier Worthy is able to drop his hips and get out of breaks that way, in a fashion that is similar to Kadarius Toney. And look, say what you want about Kadarius Toney. When he decides it's time to go a different direction, he's going that direction before anybody else gets to make the decision, let alone change direction. And that third idea there of the fact that Xavier Worthy is a competitor, guys, that might end up on the weaknesses side of things by, say, week 8. Why? Well, Xavier Worthy is a fan of planting his foot in the grass and sticking his nose between someone's numbers. And, frankly, when you're on the field with, say, Rice, maybe that works. When you're on the field with the Baltimore Ravens, however, it might end up working a little bit differently for you. And here's the thing, he did it a lot in college, and it never worked for him. Maybe he would fall forward for a yard, but guys, stingers are a real thing, and they can ruin your game very fast. Now, that size listed as a weakness, that's not height. That 165 pounds is an absolutely devastating bracket for an NFL wide receiver to find himself within. And we're going to pair this with strength. So remember in that playoff game where the Kansas City Chiefs and the Miami Dolphins played, and Tyreek Hill was absolutely mugged, absolutely mollywopped, absolutely mud-butted by L'Jarius Sneed, and the whole holler was laughing at him. You remember that moment. Now, the notable connection between Tyreek Hill and Xavier Worthy is that speed. But guys, Tyreek Hill is about 30 pounds heavier than Xavier Worthy currently finds himself. So Worthy is going to have to find some way to keep cornerbacks' hands off of him by all means necessary. As far as the drops are concerned, a good deal of that seems to be attributed by the fact that he had a broken hand his sophomore year in college, and that sort of threw everything off for him. When you start weighing these strengths against these weaknesses, as long as you can keep Xavier Worthy with a clean release, guys, those weaknesses, aside from drops, if that's a real problem, those weaknesses do not really matter. If you can get him a clean release or a release off of motion, all bets are off as far as what Xavier Worthy can get accomplished on any given play. As far as analysis is concerned, look, guys, here's the thing. I know I've been saying for a while now that I don't think Xavier Worthy is a first-round pick. I have not forgotten that. I kind of still believe that. In fact, I do still believe that if you are basically any other team but the Kansas City Chiefs. In my book, what a first-round selection is someone who has the physical profile plus the college production. Xavier Worthy has good college production, not elite college production. Xavier Worthy has elite speed, less than standard size. But when you start looking at what it is that a player is bringing to the NFL and where that might fit, you have to look no further than one Arrowhead Drive to find the lone quarterback in the NFL that is going to be able to truly make do with Xavier Worthy. And I say that despite the fact that there are other big-armed quarterbacks in the league. One of the things that Xavier Worthy does have a problem with as far as catching is concerned, when that ball gets into his body, he juggles it at times. He's not good when the ball is on his body. He has a small catch radius, meaning that there is a small window for Xavier Worthy where it is best to put that football. And when you take that to the next level, there is a small window where it is best to put that football for Xavier Worthy, and the best place for Xavier Worthy is downfield. There are not all that many quarterbacks with a great big arm and massive amounts of accuracy downfield. Patrick Mahomes happens to be one of them. One of the interesting things about doing a channel like this is that these videos sometimes end up becoming sort of time capsules. These videos end up becoming something like an artifact of fandom. I cannot tell you what that video would have been like when the Kansas City Chiefs traded all the way up to draft Patrick Mahomes, but it would have been worth looking back on for me, if no one else. But here's the thing with this offseason. It's a little bit of a shame that and I'm going to have to go back and delete all of my videos prior to this offseason anyway, just because YouTube does not like to play nice, so there's that. I just want to get that warning out there, but for these artifacts of the past. But when you're looking at this offseason, it's a little bit of a shame that all of the analysis is going to be absolutely marred by Rashee Rice and the mystery of his suspension. But when you are talking about analysis for the Xavier Worthy pick, that's where we have to start. But guys, that's nowhere near where we will end. Is Xavier Worthy an ex-wide receiver in the NFL? I do not think so right now, and I think he might never be. The big, strong guy of this offense was supposed to be Rashee Rice. His suspension will leave on the field Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy, two guys who are kind of, well, let me put it this way. I was very big on Amarius Mims coming into this draft, and it is a shame that he has found himself a member of the Cincinnati Bengals. Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown, is 180 pounds. We have already been over the fact that Xavier Worthy is 165 pounds. Together, these two individuals weigh 345 pounds, the exact listed weight of Amarius Mims. Now, I think at this point, with judging by who the Kansas City Chiefs have on the roster right now, say Rashee Rice is suspended for 8 games. I think it's going to be Justin Watson out there at the X spot. It's going to be Hollywood Brown at the Y spot, and you're going to have Xavier Worthy running in the slot. Even then, guys, even with Justin Watson being the number 1 target, quote unquote, on this football team, Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy on the field at the same time, if Xavier Worthy is who we think Xavier Worthy is, that starting lineup is leaps and bounds ahead of wherever it was last season, basically, no matter what 3 wide receivers were on the field for the Kansas City Chiefs. This season is going to be a sigh of relief for Patrick Mahomes, who has won consecutive Super Bowls, despite the fact that in each of the last 2 seasons, I got double-digit reps at wide receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs. Also, last season's team, to the best of my recollection, like I'm thinking back on it, nobody was good in that 15-yard downfield range. Nobody. Justin Watson is he's a great number 4 wide receiver. I still believe that. He's rough anywhere except for downfield. I don't want Justin Watson running a 5-yard out route. I don't want if you have Justin Watson running a 10-yard curl or comeback route, probably your offense is in a little bit of trouble. He's not a change of direction type guy. He's got speed, he's got size, and he's got some decent hands most of the time. But the fact that what Xavier Worthy brings to the field that the Kansas City Chiefs did not have at all last season is somebody who's going to be good from that 12 to 20-yard range, say, that medium range for this offense is going to add extreme levels of poop your pants factor for opposing defensive coordinators. Now, when Rashee Rice does return from this suspension, I think it's going to be a 6 or 8 game suspension. That's what I believe. The Kansas City Chiefs will have Rashee Rice on the field, who is a good possession wide receiver, good enough to nearly hit 1,000 yards as a rookie in the NFL, as a rookie in an Andy Reid offense. That is not an easy thing to do. He had 938 yards as a rookie who didn't really get any real meaningful targets until like week 6, I think it was. Then, as opposed to having Marquez Valdez-Scantling on the field, you have Hollywood Brown. MVS had 315 yards for these Kansas City Chiefs last season. 315 yards. The lowest total of Hollywood Brown's career is last season's 574 yards that he had while playing for the Arizona Cardinals. 574 yards and 4 touchdowns. Why are those 4 touchdowns notable? Well, it's more than Marquez Valdes-Scantling had in his entire 2 seasons playing for the Kansas City Chiefs. MVS had 2 touchdowns in 2022 and 1 touchdown in 2023. In fact, those 4 touchdowns would be the second highest total of MVS's career. So, Rashee Rice is going to be better this year than Rashee Rice was last year whenever it is that Rashee Rice ends up returning from suspension. Hollywood Brown is going to be better than Marquez Valdes-Scantling was at any point last season. I have full confidence in saying that. Meanwhile, you have Xavier Worthy, who is going to... So Xavier Worthy's movement skills are absolutely elite once you're talking about the start-stop ability. Really, the stop ability. His stop and restart ability is not all that phenomenal, and I think that might be why we only got the 40-yard dash and the jumping drills. He did not end up doing the cone drills. He did not do any of those numbers. But that stop ability, once you are in 4-2-1 type speed and you have a corner's hips flipped, it's just as good as start and stop ability. Because once you're stopped and that other guy keeps going, you are developing distance. You are getting separation even if you're not moving. Patrick Mahomes, by the way, is very, very good with those types of throws, those timing type of throws. Quinn Ewers in college was not good with that, so it might be that what we get with Xavier Worthy is not just the really fast guy. It's the really fast and stop guy. And if that ball is already in the air when Xavier Worthy stops on a dime 20 yards downfield, and it's going to be placed as only Patrick Mahomes can place it, that is a throw that becomes unstoppable. You are now talking about 3 wide receivers who have legitimate, definitive strengths on this team. You are talking about 3 wide receivers. Guys, I'm not convinced that if the Kansas City Chiefs had Xavier Worthy last year, I'm not convinced he would not have been the best wide receiver on the field a number of times last year. So you go back to the debacle against Detroit, where the Kansas City Chiefs did not have Travis Kelce. Now, the Kansas City Chiefs, ostensibly, you never know what's going to happen preseason. Obviously, football is a contact sport. The Chiefs have Travis Kelce. The Chiefs have 3 wide receivers that would have been the number 1 wide receiver on last year's team. If Xavier Worthy is who we think Xavier Worthy can be, those change of direction skills, being able to get open downfield, being able to add explosive plays back to this offense, the same way that Hollywood Brown is bringing back to this offense, it might not be that the Kansas City Chiefs offense has a return to form in 2024. It might be that the Kansas City Chiefs offense is better than ever it was. Remember, those explosive offenses in the first couple years of the Mahomes reign here in Kansas City, there was no real running game to speak of. Isaiah Pacheco is better, in my opinion, than any of the running backs that Patrick Mahomes has had post Kareem Hunt, and he's even faster than Kareem Hunt. I think a lot of the lack of explosive plays that we have, I think a lot of the explosive plays that we have not seen from Isaiah Pacheco is the fact that the defenses have been able to load the box in the way that they were not able to load the box against those Kansas City Chiefs that saw Kareem Hunt running the ball with Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. if you take a couple more bodies out of the box versus this Kansas City Chiefs offense, which you're going to have to do, you're going to have to take bodies out of the box if Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown are on the field at the same time. Pacheco still runs that 4-3-7, I'll bet you anything. So this offense it's not going to be very difficult to plan for. It's going to be very difficult to execute against. There is apparently a viral meme going around where some NFL general manager, when it came time that the Kansas City Chiefs turned in their draft pick and it ended up being Xavier Worthy, he sent a reporter a text message that said, "F me," only he didn't say fudge. And guys, that is why. Go back and look at that Legion of Zoom as it was presented in Kansas City. There was Tyreek Hill, who was probably a 4-2 type guy. Then the next fastest guy was McCole Hardman at 4.33, who we all know couldn't catch the ball or run the right route. I mean, I'm just saying what it is. Sammy Watkins had a single knee, and Demarcus Robinson is as Demarcus Robinson does. This Legion of Zoom, sure, Rashee Rice is a 4.5 guy, Hollywood Brown's a 4.27 guy, and Xavier Worthy is the fastest wide receiver in the history of the Combine at 4.21. Add in, you have to factor in the fact that this Kansas City Chiefs team has a running back that runs a 4.37 40-yard dash, and all of a sudden, if you are an opposing general manager, you don't know what to do as far as your team's defense is concerned. Most teams in the NFL have a cornerback that's a really, really fast guy. Most teams have at least one cornerback that's a really, really fast guy. You match him up with another really, really fast guy. The Chiefs have two just at wide receiver. So now, do you have to draft another cornerback that's a 4.3 type guy in order to keep him on your roster just for the Kansas City Chiefs? Do you downsize your entire secondary so that you have some versatility between what player can line up against Hollywood Brown, what player can line up against Xavier Worthy? Well, then you have the problem of the fact that Travis Kelce's still a real big guy. And if you have a tiny cornerback on the field that ends up in coverage against Travis Kelce, not in man-to-man, but because you're in zone at that time, well, it's going to be a real big problem for that little cornerback. An interesting question that rises because of this pick: the Kansas City Chiefs are emphasizing speed. The Kansas City Chiefs seem to be emphasizing wide receivers. What happens to the plans the Kansas City Chiefs had for tight ends, for multiple tight ends? I'm not real sure. The multiple tight end thing worked fairly well in the 2022 NFL season. It worked all the way to a Super Bowl, and the Kansas City Chiefs that season did not have a whole lot of speed on the field. Remember, that was the year that Juju Smith-Schuster ended up leading the Chiefs wide receivers in receptions, etc. Marquez Valdez-Scantling was on the field, and he was fast, sure, but he was not a threat. So it seemed that the Kansas City Chiefs were transitioning towards a multiple tight end set that was really one of these things that was going to end up being a buster for the Fangio 6 defense that was starting to take the league by storm and was really limiting offenses at that time. Remember, we've seen a quote-unquote collapse in a lot of offensive numbers across the board in the entirety of the NFL, and that Fangio 6-type formation was really a part of it. I wonder if a re-emphasis on the fact that on wide receivers in Kansas City is a reflection on the fact that it is more difficult to find quality tight ends than it is wide receivers. And that kind of makes sense, doesn't it, guys? What is a good wide receiver? A good wide receiver is a fast guy who can catch. What is a good tight end? A fast guy who can catch and is also big and probably can block a little bit. That's a whole lot more qualifiers. Now, one of the criticisms you're going to hear about this move is that now the Kansas City Chiefs have two Hollywood Browns. And technically, that's kind of right. But guys, look, Hollywood Brown has been successful in the NFL. He has a 1,000-yard receiving season to his name. He had, for a while, a very big claim to being one of the preeminent deep threats in the NFL. I don't think Hollywood Brown has the stop ability that does have Xavier Worthy. And part of the interesting thing from just the onset of this pick being made is asking how the Kansas City Chiefs are going to use these two wide receivers in tandem. Again, we started this conversation talking about the suspension of Rashee Rice, and so that question remains, right? Do you split their speed onto separate sides of the field, or do you put their speed on the same side of the field? If you put their speed on separate sides of the field, it forces two deep safeties, which is good in some aspects, but maybe not good in all aspects. If you put both of these speed demons on the same side of the field, probably what ends up happening is the defense is going to rotate or shift their coverage so that they have more safety coverage on a single half of the field than otherwise they would. I think this might be actually a more effective strategy for the Kansas City Chiefs running the ball. Look, neither Hollywood Brown nor Xavier Worthy are going to be the fiercest blockers in the NFL. They're never going to get many pancakes. But if you put Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown on the same side of the field, it will shift the coverage that direction, which is going to mean that your safety, the same way that a linebacker's first step is always forward, that safety's first step is going to have to be backwards and to the open side of the field. This might open things up just enough for Isaiah Pacheco in that running game that things get very interesting as an offense. These are the small things that guys like Andy Reid are able to play with, are able to really tinker with and open up things across the board for an offense. Another thing that is going to be absolutely devastating to defenses is pre-snap motion. I want to see Xavier Worthy absolutely tearing across the field, running full speed across the field pre-snap, only to have Patrick Mahomes hand the ball off to Isaiah Pacheco going the opposite direction. You remember the effect that Tyreek Hill had on defenses when he was in motion prior to the snap. Everyone followed him, and if they didn't, their vision sure did. They were watching Tyreek Hill and whether or not he was going to get that ball. It is going to be interesting to see whether or not Xavier Worthy can be just dangerous enough that he might take that handoff after the snap, or if that motion is utilized to get Xavier Worthy up to full speed prior to the snap, so by the time the ball is snapped, everyone is left in the dust already. So, yes, I did say that I don't think Xavier Worthy is a first-round pick. I did say that I don't think trading up for Xavier Worthy makes a whole lot of sense. Both of those things happened. Xavier Worthy was a first-round pick. He was a first-round pick for the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Chiefs did move up 4 spots in order to take him. Look, I don't have 3 Super Bowl rings, so when I give you my opinions, I'm doing the best I can. You know who does have 3 Super Bowl rings? Brett Veach. So in my opinion, sometimes my job here is to offer my opinion, and sometimes my job is to do the best I can at explaining what I think must be going on. In my opinion, this is not what I would have done in Brett Veach's position. But in order to explain what I think is happening here, the opinion that Brett Veach must have about Xavier Worthy is that he can be one of the elements that ends up making this offense transcend anything that it has been since, say, 2019. And maybe he will also help cushion the exit of Hollywood Brown after this season should Hollywood Brown decide to move on. That's what I have for this video. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other Kansas City Chiefs fans. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, consider hitting the subscribe button to stick around for more Kansas City Chiefs based content, because the Kansas City Chiefs are the only thing I talk about on this channel. And if you find yourself here by chance, oh, I already said that part. I will be back with analysis over the rest of the draft picks and the UDFAs, and I hope to have you here for those videos.